All right. This is CISS232, Client Server Scripting. I am Mike Zellers. I want to talk a little bit about the way this class is structured first. Both of you, well, I shouldn't say both of you because is there anyone watching at home, but there might be someone watching later. But those of you that are in the classroom, have you taken one of my classes before? Okay. I imagine a lot of people that are in this class have taken classes with me before, but I do want to go over the course structure just to be absolutely clear, and just in case there's someone who hasn't had me in any of my classes, just to give an overview. This class is called a blended high flex. Sounds like a kind of gas that you would get at the gas pump. You know, I'll have 5 gallons of the blended high flex, and let me go over what that means. Blended simply means that it's a cross between an online and an in-person class. We have 1 lecture a week in this class, one in-person lecture per week in this class. All right. We'll talk more about that lecture in a minute, but normally a regular in-person class has 2 lectures. Well, we only have 1 lecture in this class. The rest of the materials can be found online. And if you simply go to Canvas, if you look, each week is going to have a list of things to do, list of pieces of information to go over. And it's your responsibility to go over these things. All right, that's, you know, you've gotten out of 1 lecture, but the cost of that is that you have to review the online materials. So you're expected to review the materials that are online. Okay, the high flex means that you can attend the lectures one of 3 different ways. And they're all equal in my mind. I don't favor one over the other. They're for you to decide what works best for you. And they're for you to decide on a week-by-week basis. In other words, you don't have to make one decision and stick with it the whole semester. You can mix and match. You could one week do one thing, another week do something else. And the 3 ways to watch the lecture are, number 1, in person. This we're in BU 103 at 9 a.m. on Tuesdays this semester. So you can come there and we'll have a regular lecture, and it'll be more or less just like a regular in-person class for you. That's one option. Some people prefer that. I guess the advantage of that is some people respond better in that environment as opposed to virtual lectures that are online. And if you feel that you respond better for it, that's great. You're absolutely welcome to come. A second way to view it is you can view it online synchronously. Synchronously means at the same time. So in other words, you could get on WebEx, which is a platform we use, and go to my WebEx room at 9 a.m. on Tuesdays, and you'll be able to watch the lecture live as it occurs. Now, you can do that if for whatever reason you're not able to make it down here. And that might be, you know, a permanent reason. Maybe you have, you know, people that you're taking care of and you're not able to get away from them. Maybe, you know, maybe this is on a one-time basis, like you wake up and your car doesn't start. So, you know, you're welcome to do that either all the time or some of the time if it works for you. That's sort of the thing about that kind of viewing is it is still live. So if you have a question, you can ask me right then and there and get an answer right then and there. And there's ways, you know, I ask you to try to get my attention, you know, either post something in the chat, or I think there's an icon to raise your hand or whatever. You know, you should be able to see that pretty easily in WebEx to get my attention and ask the question. So the advantage of that is, again, it's not live, so you don't have that in-person feel, but it is synchronous. So you can ask questions as they pop into your head as I go through the lecture. The third way is to watch a recording of the lecture. And that is the ultimate convenience. You know, maybe you work from 9 to 10 a.m. on Tuesdays, and you just absolutely can't come down here. All right. Or for whatever reason, you know, you're not able to come down here or don't want to watch it synchronously. You can always watch the recording. Now the advantage of that, of course, is that's the ultimate inconvenience. You can watch the lecture anytime you want. So the downside of that is if you have questions, you can still ask them, but you have to ask them via email. And you're not necessarily going to get an immediate response because I'm not sitting waiting for emails to come in all day. All right. Therefore, I tend to answer my email at least once a day. So, you know, if you ask a question today, there's a chance you might not get an answer until tomorrow, depending on whether I've checked my email or not. As I said, I have no preference between those methods. It's not like I encourage you to come in person or encourage you to watch online. Whatever works best for you. This is set up this way for you, all right, not for me. All right, so whatever works best for you, I think we have an answer for it or a solution for it. And you can mix and match, as I said before. You don't have to pick one and stick with it the whole semester. You can choose which one works for you. All right, I'm not going to read all the online materials or the syllabus. I just want to point out some things. Read the getting started section and read week 1 and review the syllabus. Now, one thing I didn't mention about, which I'll mention about now, are the labs. Okay. We have an in-person lab immediately after this class in BU 210. So after this class, I will take my gear, go up to BU 210, and we'll have an in-person lab. And the labs are there for you to work on your assignments. All right. Now, you can also connect the lab via WebEx. So if you were one of those people that are stuck at home for whatever reason, and you want to ask me questions during lab, immediately after this class for an hour, I'm available on WebEx to answer your questions. That actually has worked out fairly well. In fact, sometimes if there's people in person in lab, I ask them to hop on WebEx simply because I can share screens with them. I can share my screen and show them something, or they can share their screen and I can see something on their computer. So it works out really well in WebEx, given the ability to share screens and so on. So you can attend lab virtually. So just come to the WebEx room from 10 to 11 on Tuesdays, and I'll be there. Now, you are also welcome to attend any of my other classes' labs. All right. What does that mean? That means that I have 4 classes, 4 in-person classes, and each one of them has a lab session for an hour. All right. I made this offer to my other classes, and I'll make the same offer to you. All right. If you want to, you can come into either in person or virtually to any of my lab sessions. So these are sort of a cross between office hours / lab sessions. So you can come, for example, Monday from 11 or from 10 to 11. You can either come in person to BU 102, or you can get on WebEx and ask me questions. So if you need additional help, there's 4 hours during the week that you're able to connect with me without even making an appointment. I will be there. On occasion, I might be a few minutes late if I got caught up or I had to use the restroom or something like that. But you can count on me being in my WebEx room during these hours. And I will be in person in these rooms. BU 102 for Monday at 10 to 11. The rest of them are in BU 210. Now, what if those times don't work for you? What again, if you work 9 to 5, let's say, for example, and you can't come to any of those lab sessions in person or virtually, well, then we can schedule another time. I do my best to be flexible about that. I can accommodate virtually any schedule. So when you send me an email, none of these times work for you, and you still, or you attended these labs and you still have additional questions. You know, maybe you have a question on a Wednesday, you know, and you don't want to wait another week or half a week to my next lab session. You can email me and we can schedule a time to meet, typically via WebEx, to go over any questions that you have and answer that. First of all, you can ask the question. I might be able to just give you a very quick answer, depending on exactly what the issue is. You know, maybe you simply forgot a semicolon, in which case I can say, hey, you know, check this line, maybe you forgot something. All right. Now, to get the best response from me, when you email me to ask for an appointment to see me, or when you email me with a question, do the following things. First of all, include all of your code. My suggestion is that you have a separate folder for each assignment, and zip up the folder and email it to me, attach it to the email, just like you would if you were turning it in. Don't send me a single file. Don't send me a screenshot of your editor. Don't send me the code pasted into the email. Actually create an attachment that has a zip file that has all your code. Right? So do that. Give a complete and specific description of your issue. Here you may use screen captures. For example, you might say, you know, depending on how obvious it is, you might say, for example, this button, I think it should be further down on the page. Well, show me a screenshot of where the button is, and you can even edit the screenshot to put a little arrow to show where you want it to appear on the page. Or be specific. Say, when I click this button, nothing happens. When I click this button, some of the times it gives me an answer, some of the times it gives me an error. Things like that. You know, so, but be specific. Don't just tell me it's not working. You know, I don't know what that means when you say it's not working. And again, you'll still get your answer. It'll just be delayed, because I'll say, what do you mean it doesn't work? And then you'll clarify it. And it's just better to do that right off from the start. And then I can give you my best answer right from the start. If you do want to see me or make an appointment, if it's, say, a bigger issue that you just fundamentally don't understand something and you want to make an appointment, give me some days and times that you're available. You know, tell me I'm available Wednesdays from 9 till noon, and I'm available Thursdays from 5 to 7 p.m. Something like that. Give me a few choices to choose from, and usually I can pick something that works. If not, we'll go and we'll figure something out. Do not upload assignments to the Dropbox unless it's ready to be graded. So if you're working on something, and even if the deadline's coming up and it doesn't work, I'd rather you take the extra time to figure it out and get it working than to upload something that doesn't work, that you know doesn't work. Right? Submit something that works. And don't upload stuff unless it's ready to be graded. All right. Here's some other information about the course, outcomes, no textbooks, some policies, instructor policies, my approach, late work. All right. I aim to be very flexible on late work. You know, different instructors have different approaches, right? And which one is right? They're all right, or they're all wrong. I don't know, one of the two. All right. I want my focus to be on getting things done correctly as opposed to getting things done on time. Obviously, the best solution is to get things done perfectly on time. But if you have to sacrifice one for the other, turn in something that's perfect late as opposed to turning something that doesn't work but it's on time. Right? What do I deduct for late work? That depends. All right. If we're going back and forth and you sent me a question and you said, I just can't get these menus to work. I click on this and something appears way over there, and I expect it to appear over here. We're going back and forth and you're asking questions and I'm answering them and we schedule an appointment and, so on. If you're interacting with me and you're letting me know, these are the difficulties I'm having with the assignment, then I'm not going to deduct points, because I know you're working on it. I know you're making a sincere effort and it's just not done on time.
Is this legal business? No.
I was going to say something funny, but no, it isn't.
All right.
What room are you looking for?
I have no idea.
Do you have your schedule?
No, I forgot it at home.
Okay.
Yeah.
My suggestion would be to go up to BU, the business office upstairs, and ask them. They might be able to help you out. Right. So yeah, get it right as opposed to get it in on time. Now, let's say that you're not having a problem with it. It's just you got the flu, you haven't been able to work on the assignment, or you had to go out of town for someone's wedding, or your kid's sick, or you're working overtime at work, or whatever. If you just let me know that there's something special going on that's keeping you from getting the work done, I also won't deduct. Gee, can I have a day extension because I ended up working to 10 p.m. last night and I wasn't able to finish this. I'm going to say, yeah, most likely. All right. And you don't even have to tell me like details of your personal life. I trust you all. You're all adults. You don't really need to divulge any details that you don't want me to know. All right. Now, here's the thing. There's a catch to this. You might think, hey, that's pretty cool. I can turn in stuff whenever I feel like it. All right, here's the catch. If you find that you're consistently turning stuff in late, that's a warning sign. All right? Because there's going to come the end of the semester when I can't be flexible. There's going to be that deadline at the very end of the semester that on December whatever, by midnight, it has to be in, and I won't accept anything after it. So there is a rigid deadline at the very end of the semester. And if you're continually falling behind, you're going to put at danger your ability to finish all the work and really give yourself, damage your grade quite a bit. So if you're late once, no big deal. If you're continually late, then we should talk, because maybe you need to spend more time working on it. Maybe you need to free up some time somehow. Or maybe you need to come to lab to ask me questions. Or, I've had students that I've checked in with. I've asked them to just send me an email every 2 days, tell me the progress they've made. Not like I'm grading it, or not like it's penalty or anything, but just keep me updated with where you are so I can catch you before you go too far off track. So if you're continually late, then that's a warning that you need to do better. And I'm here to work with you in order to do better. It's not like I'm just going to say, hey, do better. I'm going to we're going to work together to figure out what we need to do to get you back on track. AI usage policy. I had to think very hard about this because AI obviously is a big force, and it's a big force in information technology. And as someone preparing to be an information technology professional, you should be aware of AI and you should know how it's able to help you, right? So I wouldn't want to ban AI and say, no, you can't use it at all right? However, by the same token, just like it wouldn't be acceptable if you copied someone else's work, it's not acceptable if you copy AI's work. So if you have a question, you know, like, what property do I set to make something disappear on my page? It's a fair question to ask AI, because that's not doing your work for you. That's just answering a question. So you're using AI as just sort of a helper or a tutor. It's not doing the work for you. If, however, you say, write a function that does such and such and such, then that's sort of crossing the line. If you do use AI, I would like you to write up how you used it, a description of how you used it, and just include it as in a separate file. If you ever have any question whether what you're doing is acceptable or not, let me know and we'll figure it out. If I have reason to suspect that you used AI improperly, we'll review the situation and go from there. All right. I had a student last year that it looked to me like he was using AI for a number of different reasons. I talked to him and he convinced me that he had not used AI for that. He explained the situation to me and I accepted it. So, you know, it's not like I'm doing that again to give you a penalty when I say talk with me. You know, maybe, you know, whatever, depends on the particular situation. You know, we'll come to some conclusion about what we need to do going forward. All right, the rest of this, I trust you read on your own. And I mentioned before the modules. As a blended class, this online material is part of the course. And as we only have one lecture, you're expected to review this on your own time. Now, I want to start back and talk about what happens. What's the flow of information when you request a web page? So I go to my browser. Whatever browser I'm using, Chrome, Microsoft Edge, and I type in an address. ESPN.com. And boom, I get the answer back. I get the page back. Let's talk about how that works in a little more detail. Let's sort of break it down and study the actual flow of information. All right. Now I use this diagram or a diagram very much like it in many of my other classes, and I'll probably refer to it in this class a lot too. Here you are, and we'll call you the client. All right. You know, you're sort of the customer in this transaction. You're the client. In information technology terms, a client is an entity that makes a request for something. All right. Now, this request you're not making directly to the server. What's a server? A server is a system that responds to requests. All right. So you're not making it directly to the server. You're making it through the internet, which is represented with the big cloud. You make the request to the internet. That request, based on the address that you type in and the IP address that gets turned into, and all those networking things that we don't really cover in this class. But that request gets routed to the proper server. And what's part of a request? What's in a request? Well, at the very least, the URL, the address of the web page that you're going to. In addition, there's information about you. There's your IP address. IP address is needed because where you're going to send the response back to. The server needs to know that. From the IP address, you can determine the location. A server can determine the location. You ever notice in Google, for example, if you type in Italian restaurants, for example, Google Italian restaurants, it will show you Italian restaurants in whatever area you're in the Elyria area or the Amherst area or whatever. The request might contain the data. Now, in this case, this particular request of just going to ESPN, there's no data, but if you fill in a form, for example, the login form to Canvas, you're sending that data that was in the login form as a request to the server. Other stuff, including the platform that you're on. Are you on Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, Linux, whatever? And there's a whole bunch of other stuff too, but these are probably the most important things. That request goes like as a package, gets routed to the server, and then the server prepares a response. That gets routed to the client. And the response is in the form of a web page. The client is typically running a browser. So that web page or that browser takes the web page and displays it in the proper format, puts everything in its right place, makes everything its proper color, uses the correct fonts, and so on. Now, when we talk about a web page, we're talking about some combination of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, I think most of you in this course have had CISS216, so we've touched on all of these in CISS216. We went over HTML and CSS pretty thoroughly, and we talked a little bit about JavaScript near the end of it. But that gets sent to the client. All right, the web server. What does a web server do? Well, depends on the kind of page that's being requested. If it's just a plain old simple page, plain old HTML, something that you might have done for CISS216, it's called a static page. Static in this context means unchanging. If I say something static, it means it doesn't change. So if you have taken one of your web pages from CISS216 and put it on a web server, that would be a static page. And all the web server has to do is take that page, send the response back through the internet to the client that requested it, and the client's browser will display it. So the server has a real easy job when it comes to static pages. They just deliver what has already been prepared and is sitting there waiting for them. Now, if you think about it for any length of time, you'll realize that there's not a lot of static pages. Most of the pages are dynamic. For example, Google. All right. With Google, your search result page looks different every time you run a different search, right? If you search for Italian restaurants, you're going to get a certain set of links. If you search for Asian restaurants, you're going to get a different set of links. If you search in Detroit versus Cleveland, you'll get a different set of links in those two circumstances as well. So in dynamic web pages, the server doesn't have prepared web pages. The server has code, sometimes called scripts, depending on the kind of code that it is. But the server has code that runs, that takes this request, processes it, and prepares an HTML page on the fly, right? It's kind of like ordering from Subway, right? When you go to Subway, there's not a rack with all the different kind of possible subs that you can order, right? That sub is made, this isn't an advertisement, by the way, but it's made fresh for you right as you place the order. They take your request, what you want, assemble the ingredients together, and give you a sandwich. Well, the web server does about the same thing. It takes your request and it processes it and produces a web page. Here's the key. When it gets to the client, no matter what, whether it's a static or dynamic page, it still comes back as a web page. Consider a static page as being like a completed dish. Like I cooked the pot roast and I'm delivering the pot roast to the client. Where with server-side scripts, the recipe is read first and that pot roast is created and then that's delivered to the client. Now, the one thing that servers do, oftentimes, is they interact with databases. In fact, a web server actually is a client to a database server. So when I say something's a server, I'm talking about a particular kind of transaction it's performing. So, if I had a computer here, for web pages, it might be the web server for our website, but it might be a client to the database server that's in another room. Okay, so we got code over here and we got code over here. What's the difference between that code? The difference between the code is this. The code on the server side is responsible for preparing web pages. All right. Its job is to create a web page. And it does it by performing calculations, interacting with databases, all different kinds of stuff. So it is involved in preparing a web page. That's what the code does on the server side. On the client side, the code, the JavaScript, is used to alter an existing page. So getting back to our case here, I request ESPN.com. That request went to the server. The server probably interacted with the database to get these results and sends all that over to the client. So the work happened on the server side very quickly to get those results, send them to the client. And now, this is an example of client-side code because I'm altering an existing page. This is an example of client-side code. This is an example of client-side code. So the code to make a page is typically done on the server. The code that alters a page is typically done on the client. Now, the stuff on the server is where you do things that are secure. Like you wouldn't want the client trying to access your database, even if they could. That's not a good idea. So therefore, that's something secure. Usually the processing that happens on the server side is more intensive. Whereas the code that happens on the client side is more about interactivity. Making things appear and disappear. And that interactivity can get incredibly complex, but in a nutshell, that's the difference between client side and server side code. Now there's one more thing in the mix, and that is AJAX. And what AJAX is this. Let's say I go to our friend Google. And I start typing. So I type A. I get the top results, top 10 results of stuff that start with A. Who would have thought that AOL Mail would be in the top 10? Let's say I type in the next letter, J. Shows a list of things that start with AJ. A. Shows things that start with AJA. X starts with things that start with AJAX. Interestingly enough, the web development AJAX is not listed here. But if I type in web, it'll show up. Now, it's not clear if this is happening on the client and server side or server side, right? Because I type something in, an existing page changes, right? So that leads you to think that it's client side. Yet, this is a lot of processing to come up with a list of 10 terms. That's going to involve probably some form of database interactivity. All right, that's some kind of heavy lifting to consider all the possible things that a user could type in and show me the top 10 things that match that. That's a lot of processing, and that's going to happen on the server. Well, AJAX is a way of having the client interact with the server where they don't get a whole web page back, they just get a piece of data. So if I was going to add another kind of request, there's also AJAX requests. And with AJAX requests, the response is not a whole web page, but some data. We'll study that towards the end of the semester. Now, I know this first example of JavaScript is review. All right, I'm sure those of you that have taken CISS232, you probably have seen examples like this before. But I do want to go over a very simple JavaScript example and make some points about it. This actually is sort of the building block to these mouse over menus. This is a really simplified version of that. I put my mouse over the link and the submenu appears. Take my mouse out and it doesn't disappear. Interesting. We can look at that. Maybe I did that on purpose. Maybe I made a mistake. I don't recall. So let's look at the code that does that. In this course, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code as the editor. You can use whatever text editor you like. I like Visual Studio Code. Oh, I just don't have any code to do that. I know we've viewed examples like this in 216, but this is really just a reminder. This is the three parts of a web page working together: the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript. The HTML includes the link and includes the submenu. The CSS makes the submenu originally visible. And finally, the JavaScript is interactive, so when the user puts their mouse over it, it changes the display style from none to block. And I could add in say on mouse out, change it back to none. Now, we talked about sort of the ingredients of JavaScript. One of the things is that it involves events. And in this case, the two events that we have are mouse over and mouse out. Appears, disappears. So this is an event. That's the first thing that sort of gets the ball rolling in JavaScript. You have some sort of event that says, when this happens, here's how you interact with it. Here's the interaction that happens. We then have the DOM. The DOM is a way of referring to things on the screen, the page. And in this case, I say document get element by ID submenu that finds the thing on the page that has an ID of submenu, and that's what we're going to do something with. What are we going to do? When we put the mouse over, we're going to change the style. The display part of the style, we're going to change it to block. On mouse out, we're going to change it back to none. So most JavaScript contains those things. It contains an event that gets the ball rolling, and it contains the DOM to find the different things on the page that you want to interact with and what you want to do with them. And then finally, there's just plain old syntax of JavaScript and the instructions. This is a very simple one. It's just one instruction, but the instructions can get much longer than just the one. Now, a few things about JavaScript is that it's case sensitive. So if I mistype and type in document with a capital D, doesn't work all of a sudden. What do you do if it doesn't work? Well, you have two main options. Option one is to stare at the code and hope that the answer jumps off the page into your eyes and you know what to do. That's probably not the preferred option. The better option is to look to see if you have any errors. How do you do that? Well, when you're in Chrome, you click on these three dots, click on More Tools, Developer Tools, and then go to Console. And Console tells you there's a problem. And it doesn't always tell you like exactly what the problem is. You might have to do a little bit of interpretation, but it gives you a good idea of where to look. In this case, I don't know if you can read it, but it says document get element by ID is not a function. And you might think, well, sure it's a function. I remember that, and you might Google it or ask AI or look back in your notes or look back in a previous example and see, oh, document with a capital D dot get element by ID is not a function. Oh, this has to be a lowercase d. So if you come to me and have a question about something in JavaScript, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, are there any errors? Right? Because I want you to get used to looking at that, because that could at least give you a good idea of what the error is. And you might still be confused. I'm not saying it will give you the answer 100% of the time. You have to look at it, and sometimes you have to do a little interpretation. But I want you to at least look at the error, because after you get a few errors, you recognize them. You know, I've been at this for a long time, right? And therefore, when I see an error message, I pretty much immediately know what the problem is. Why? Because I've made millions of errors. All right. It's the advantage of having worked for a long time. You make a whole bunch of errors, and then you start to be able to recognize them, especially based on the error message. So always look at the error message, even if you're still confused, you can still ask the question, but look at it so you begin getting used to, oh, that's what this error means. And then the next time, maybe it'll be a little easier to figure out exactly what the problem is. Are there any questions at this point? All right. That's all I had for today. Remember, the lab is optional. You can go to it or not go to it. I'll be there regardless, because I'll be waiting in WebEx to see if anyone pops on that way. We'll see you next week or up in lab.